So if you're like me, you realized, for me a couple years ago, that living in the United States was not necessarily in my best interest, at least not full time. And my wife and I decided to move to Mexico, which is very convenient for us, and we have our reasons for that. But I want to talk in this video about how you decide on which international country that you want to live in. So I have got Dan Prescher with me today. He is a senior editor over at International Living, and so he is an expert in helping people move out of the US and Canada, or I guess pretty much anywhere, and get to a new life overseas. So let's meet Dan.
Brighton, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. Much appreciated. Where are you? I can see like tropical vegetation out your window.
That is actually not tropical vegetation. Sadly, that is a scarlet oak up here in Oregon.
Oh.
As I mentioned, I go back and forth, and so I'm not full time in Mexico. This is the time for me to be up in Oregon during the summer when it's gorgeous up here. So my wife and I try to spend our Mexico time when it's really ugly up here, and then come back, and we switch back to here.
I understand completely. My wife and I'm talking to you from Omaha, Nebraska right now for some strange reason. That's my hometown. My wife and I lived out of the country for 20 years, since 2001, when we both started working for International Living. We came back in 2019 to be close to our granddaughter, so we were kind of part-timing, and COVID caught us in the States. So we've been in the States for the last couple of years. So I understand completely about the going back and forth and the part-time, which is what more and more people that we talk to at International Living are doing anyway. They're part-timing. They've got a foot in both worlds and are trying to balance that out. And it's an interesting proposition. It's something that the internet, I think, has made possible. The very reason we're talking right now. It's facilitated a lot of this new international living lifestyle.
Yeah, and we are going to kind of focus on that choice of where to live and how to go from, this is my favorite vacation destination, is it a good place to live, and what all those things. But I do want to talk a little bit about your journey in international living, because we kind of had maybe a little bit of the opposite, because right at the beginning of the pandemic is when we moved part-time to Mexico. So kind of at the beginning of the pandemic, you were heading north. So have you lived personally for any amount of time in different places, or are you kind of just scooting around? Because there are people who move around a lot, and there's people like us who settle in, buy a house, and hang out. So which are you?
We started doing this in 2001 when we moved to Ecuador, Quito, Ecuador, for International Living. And it seems like every 2 to 4 years we moved since we started doing that. We became what we called serial relocators. The first time or two, it took some doing, there were ducks you had to get in a row. You had to worry about your finances. But the more we did it, the easier it got. And I think the fact that we were moving to very affordable places to live and very easy places to live, mostly in Central and South America and Mexico, we just got the bug. So we call Merida hometown. We lived there for 3 years. We call San Miguel de Allende hometown. We refurbed our first house, our first international real estate purchase there. We called Cotacachi, Ecuador, one of our favorite hometowns, off and on there for 7 years. So yeah, we're kind of serial relocators.
Awesome. And actually, I do want to point out a video that I did with Michael, and it'll be up in one of these corners. I never remember which one. And I think he lived maybe in Cotacachi, because I remember it was a name that I could not understand. And the reason he lived there, he now lives in San Miguel de Allende. Mm-hmm. Great story that he has. But he credited International Living with giving him his short list of 5, starting in Cotacachi, and then making it San Miguel de Allende, where he was like, put on the brakes. He's like, I found the spot. Don't even need to go to the other 2 or the other 3.
We've said that many times, Brighton. Several of the places we've gone, we said, this is it. We're fine here. Don't need to look anymore. And 2 or 3 years later, we're going, wow, that looks kind of nice. And our last editorial trip took us to your neck of the woods in Ensenada, Loreto, La Paz, I fell in love with each place. I would have stayed there if Susan had said okay. But we just fall in love with every place we go. I think it's an occupational hazard.
Yes. Awesome. Well, it's great to have that job where you're moving around and it matches your personality, obviously. But let's look at kind of the average person, maybe the average international living reader. We're going to have a little plug later on for an upcoming conference where I'll be speaking that is more about retirement. But is international living, how much focused on retirement is it?
It's been around for almost 40 years. And for much of that time, it was almost completely focused on retirement because international living was the original outfit that said, you want to make your pension go farther? You want to live on your Social Security? You want to live like a king on pennies a day? Here's where you go. So retirees were almost our entire demographic. But as you know, the internet changed everything for everybody about 10 or 15 years ago. And now families are moving. And if they can't find a good school where they move, they educate their kids online. Digital nomads are working from anywhere on the planet that they can get a Wi-Fi signal. So it's not just retirement anymore. I'm a great example. I'm a baby boomer. I'm not retired, but my wife is, and there are a lot of us, and we're all concerned with making our Social Security and our health care as good and as affordable as possible. But like I said, there's a huge variety in our demographic now because people of all ages and all walks of life are finding out that if they move abroad, they can improve their lifestyle and their finances.
Yeah, and that's so much. I mean, yeah, we live in an expensive country here in the United States, also in Canada. I'm not sure how many I know you guys are based in Ireland, so international living, I guess, is defined differently for different people. But let's get into that, digging in, because you mentioned a lot of things, healthcare and, access to Medicare, how far your dollar stretches. So maybe let's go through and let's start out with, okay, someone loves travel. They want to live somewhere else. And let's put them as say they're in Kansas now. What advice would you give to them for making that decision on where to go?
Number one, don't pick the place where you had a great vacation. It may be a terrific place to live, but you won't know until you're there year round. Every place has a slow season. Every place has an off season. And if you had 2 wonderful margarita-filled weeks on a beach somewhere, that doesn't mean it's going to be a great place to live. Number 2, after you get over that, profile yourself ruthlessly and decide what it is you're after. Are you really after doing nothing but laying on a hammock on the beach? Because if you are, there are a lot of places you can do that. But if you want more out of life, you'd better start looking at places in detail. How's the health care close by? Are you going to need a regular checkup? How are your teeth doing? Do you like to get your mail? What's the mail delivery like? How hard is it to get internet service there? How dependable is the phone? Are there any zoning restrictions? Do you mind buying a place in a beautiful little part of town and having a machine shop or a swine slaughtering facility or a disco next to you? Because in a lot of places, they don't have those zoning requirements. Things are different than they are in the United States. So first, profile yourself ruthlessly. Find out what you're really after, what you can really afford to live without. If you have to have 500 thread count sheets, if you have to have 8 kinds of roasted red peppers, there are going to be some places where you're not going to be happy. And that's all right, because you need what will make you happy. That's what you should be going for. But you have to be honest with yourself about what actually makes you happy and whether this place that you're thinking about is going to have it. That's where the research starts, I think.
That is a great point of really getting to know yourself. I mean, Kat and I just kind of jumped into this whole international living thing, and we're only part-timers, but I have heard of other people leaving Mexico, specifically leaving La Paz because of some of those things. They weren't cut out for having roosters and dogs, and your neighbor You're right. It's not guaranteed. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't places in Mexico or even in La Paz that you can change that. I mean, you can live behind a gate in La Paz too. But it's good to have that figured out in advance. So now we've got this figured out. We've kind of figured out what's important to us. What are some other considerations when we start looking at maybe, comparing different countries almost? Because now we're talking about different currencies and different, potentials for healthcare and taxes and
countries.
Things like that.
Countries are tough to do because countries are big places. It's like somebody saying, should I live in the United States or Canada? Well, are you talking the difference between Montreal and Detroit? Are you talking about the difference between Beaver Crossing and Laverne? You almost have to get down to the municipal and even neighborhood level. There are places in Quito, Ecuador that I'd move back to in a heartbeat. But there are other parts of that city I don't want to live in. And like you said about La Paz, you can live in a gated community. If that's what you want, there are some beautiful gated communities there. If you want to be part of the neighborhood, if you want to have local friends, if you want to take part in the street life, there are places where you'll be comfortable doing that too, which is why we recommend once you make your short list, you should visit each one of those places as long as possible, certainly longer than an average vacation. Try to get a feel for what it's like to be there for months at a time, because then you'll find out whether your phone works, how good the internet infrastructure is, if the clinic is acceptable for your needs, and if it's easy to get to, and if it's open when you need it. So get all of those things settled.
I want to add on to that a little bit is to, this is probably great where Airbnb comes in is very helpful, is don't stay at the resort and just experience the weather, but go out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Find the ATM machines and go out and see and live in the neighborhood that you might be considering so that you are familiar with the noises and the potential smells or whatever it is, and live like you're living there, not like you're on vacation. And I mean, realistically, we're talking people who aren't yet retired. Maybe you can. I mean, a lot of people can work remotely while on vacation, so you can go even for. I know a lot of people can go for a month or two and live wherever and continue their work, so that you're working during the day and at night you're experiencing, and on weekends you're experiencing everything. So there are a lot of opportunities there. But I guess if you are kind of still a working 9 to 5 in an actual location and retirement is coming up, I mean, if the best you can do is spend a week somewhere, I guess that's better than nothing.
It is. It's better than nothing. And one surefire way to limit your list is to do what Susan and I did and just concentrate on Latin America, because we know enough Spanish to get by. Almost everybody, whether they know it or not, knows enough Spanish to get by. And almost every person throughout Latin America that we've met knows enough English to help out as well. So it's familiar. The currency exchange rates are understandable. You know the difference between a peso and a Mexican peso and the US dollar and the Canadian dollar, the real, whatever the local currency is. That's harder to do in a place like Cambodia or Malaysia or even some places in Eastern Europe. So for ease of settling in, there's also the factor that this is not unplowed ground. A lot of expats have already made this move. Their communities are tightly knit. They talk to each other. I mean, you're a perfect example of that. Networks are already formed. They're already there. They're already helping each other out. Panama is a beautiful example of that. North Americans have been in Panama for a century because of the canal. They're well used to North Americans, their idiosyncrasies, their likes, their dislikes. It's easy to settle into. So if you just want some exotic culture and you want to get out of the United States or Canada, but you don't want to just leave behind everything familiar that you've ever known in your life, Latin America is it. I mean, Susan and I are just sold on it. We love it, and especially Mexico. I mean, we've lived in 3 different places in Mexico, might live in another one before it's all over. We're still permanent residents of Mexico because it's so easy. There's a lot to be said for the convenience factor. There really is.
Yeah, Mexico makes it incredibly easy for people from outside to become residents of the country, to establish yourself. You know, a lot of people hear that you can't buy land near the water and whatnot, and there's a system for everything, and they're totally legit systems. I mean, there are lots of not legit systems too, but there's a lot of easy, legit systems in Mexico. And one thing we like about Mexico, and maybe this is something also to consider, is the distance to get home. We drive down once a year, and we drive back once a year with our dogs and cats if we have them. And La Paz is an easy 4-day drive from Portland. And, you know, going further into Latin America, you know, that's a lot more work. Or going, if you want to drive. And the accessibility of an airport is probably another big thing. La Paz has a international airport, but I use air quotes because there are no international flights right now.
But you can get in and out. You can fly in and out, which is the way Susan and I got there the last time we explored it. And there's a lot to be said for that. We were living in Ecuador right after 9/11. And we felt very isolated. The place we moved right after that was San Miguel de Allende. And we liked it because if the plane stopped flying again tomorrow, we could drive back. And we did. We drove back and forth for many years. And it is comforting to be able to do that. Throw in Baja California's status as a free trade zone, which makes it ridiculously easy to get in and out at the border and drive your own car in. And it's a combination that can't be beat, really.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some questions as to whether that might be changing, actually, in Baja California Sur. Lots of rumors floating around. But
when will you find out? Will that be a next election issue, or inquiring minds want to know?
There's a lot of inquiring minds want to know. I've been searching and trying to get anyone to tell me for sure. But there are some people talking about it, and no one can find any information one way or the other. But the only thing we know is that the president at the beginning of his term, when he was listing off the free trade zone areas, failed to mention Baja California Sur. He did mention Baja California, the northern half. So
you'd think he would have mentioned Baja Sur, yeah.
Right. So there is definitely, everything still is existing. The things are working the way they were, but inquiring minds want to know, as you mentioned. And that's part of the living overseas. And maybe that might be
it's part of living everywhere now, Brian. Yeah. You don't escape the bureaucracy. You don't escape the weirdness. The world is the world. It's just the type of bureaucracy and weirdness that you get that changes.
Yeah, and that might be also something in terms of Latin America versus Europe. The Europeans probably have a system that's more like the United States in terms of regulations and things like that versus other areas. There's probably more likely to be zoning. So let's, before I talk about the way they can ask questions and whatnot and get more answers, you have one last thing that you'd like to add in terms of helping people decide how to go about this decision.
Oh, wow. The research is so easy now. You're there. Internet resources are there. Facebook pages are there. International Living is there. There's no excuse for not talking to people who are actually doing it in real time and picking their brains, because we're everywhere. We're all over the world, and there are millions of us. So if you want to get into this lifestyle, the research is easy to do. What it takes is a sense of adventure if you're really cut out for it. And not everybody is, and that's fine. But if you're really cut out for it, that sense of adventure to pull the trigger, give it a try, make the jump. And this is the main piece of advice I wanted to give. It's not a one-way jump. As Susan and I know very well, as serial relocators, you can jump 5, 6, 7 times and then jump back to the States and then jump back out if you want to. It's not like falling off a cliff. So relax, give it a try, have fun. There is no such thing as failure. You'll just be wiser than you were before, no matter what happens.
Awesome. That is true. And that's how I kind of approach every day down in Mexico is, if it's the 12th time trying to get the electricity bill switched to my name, I'm going to learn something new. Coming up, I've kind of alluded to this. Coming up in July, I think it was the 12th, is going to be a forum conducted by International Living. So maybe you can give us just a tiny little bit about what you know. I know this forum isn't your exact thing, but yeah, what can people expect?
This is one of the things that we started doing during COVID, during the pandemic. Everybody went online. So we started to take our conferences and our forums online as well. They worked really well because almost everybody now is tech savvy enough to join an online forum in real time and ask questions. It's a great way to get your questions answered. You'll be there at the forum, the online forum. There'll be a number of other experts there in banking, visas, insurance, real estate, the things you need to know if you actually want to make that move. Ask first people who have done it and know how to accomplish these things right. And your buck's ahead. This will last all day. You and a bunch of other experts will be there. You'll field questions. It's a great way for people to get their feet wet and find out what the considerations are and get some of their questions answered.
Well, thank you for that little preview. There will be a link down below to probably register so that you can get signed up for this online forum. But Dan, thank you so much for providing this little preview. I know that you've been traveling around for many years, tried out many places, and that's definitely helpful to, as you said, ask people that have done it before. And so you're one of those people. There are so many of those people around. Facebook groups are a wonderful way to reach people too. So any parting thoughts?
Don't be afraid. Keep your sense of humor and do it. You won't regret it. You may not have the time you thought you would. You probably won't have the time you thought you were going to have, but you'll have an interesting time and you'll be the better for it.
Awesome. I love those comments. And actually, I've got some other folks up here who've also done it because I want to do the same thing. I want to inspire you to make it happen. These people have made it happen. Go ahead and listen to their stories next. Hasta luego.